All right, welcome to our session number 4. This is compressed down to 10 minutes for the full version with full commentary. Check out my Patreon, linked in the card and stuff. And here we go. So this time around, it looks like I'm doing some more cleanup work. The little under faces, under the horns need some attention. So I'm just breaking out those forms, adding some geometry to the back so that I'll have more to work with, and then smoothing those out, building up some of those edges, because some of those edges are really thin and tend to, if you Dynamesh when the walls are too thin, you'll have these weird funky holes, and they look kind of screwy. I've seen some people use that for really interesting artistic sculpts, but that's not what we want to do for here. So I just want to build up all of these forms under the faces, under the horn, to make it look sort of like a little beetle monster kind of thing with a hard shell for the nose. So that's the goal for this session here. I think I also work on the cheekbone, so lots of sculpting to make sure that the various parts look like they're supposed to slot into each other. Simple brushes. Again, the clay buildup brush, the move brush, the Damien standard brush for the sharp cut-ins and things like that. Every once in a while I'll use the inflate brush to build up certain parts of the geometry. Yeah, it's a lot of the same stuff that I was doing with the previous one. Moving, masking, Dynameshing, building up forms. There in the back, I'm building up the bottom of the jaw, or what will eventually be the jaw for these under faces. And here I'm extending the cheek because there wasn't a whole lot of geometry on that side, and it's gonna get hidden once the cheekbones are fixed and built up. But the idea is to still have enough geometry so that it looks like there's more to that face than you can physically see. So a lot of pushing, a lot of smoothing, a lot of building and smoothing, and then nudging and smoothing and nudging. And the idea is just to get to a level of detail where I no longer feel the need to Dynamesh. So if I'm doing a major move, like moving a big face, or like building up a form that changes the silhouette of the object that I'm working on, after I do that, I'll typically do a Dynamesh to build up the geometry and stuff like that. If it's a smaller move, I'm not so concerned with making sure that geometry, the polygons are even throughout the thing. So I don't know. I feel like at some point I'm gonna have to do a proper ZBrush tutorial, but because like, unless you do a lot of sculpting, Dynamesh is like, what the fuck is a Dynamesh? Yeah, so just building in the ridge, pushing some of that back, and just cleaning up some forms and things like that. So I'm loosely following the sketch, but there's a lot of details that are not in the sketch that I'm bringing out in this sculpting part here. For instance, like the sketch has no detail for the bottom of these underfaces. So that's all implied, and so all of this stuff is just making it up where I think it should fit, or what I think would look cool. Most of this is basically, do I think this will look cool? And if the answer is sure, then I'll stick it in. Those teeth are eventually going to be modeled individually, but for now they're just, I kind of dig them in with the Damien standard brush, so I have something to, like a landmark to place the actual teeth. If I was very clever, I would have a whole system of teeth ready to go. I think there is actually an insert brush. I think it's like a dragon sculpt that they broke out into pieces that has teeth that you can use, but I prefer to build all my own stuff. Unless it's mechanical bits like screws or random little minus molds. I'll use the model kit insert mesh because I like them. But for the most part, I tend to rebuild everything. One, because it's helpful to learn stuff, but two, I want to be able to say that I did everything myself and not, relied on someone else's stuff. So now it looks like I'm building up the cheek areas. So same thing I've been doing. Break off that piece of geometry and then close holes, which creates a bit of geometry where the empty space is, and then take that empty space, pull it out so that there's an edge for me to work with, and then re-dynamesh. So that's what this process is. It's kind of boring and kind of not too interesting, so thankfully it's sped up. But it's helpful to build up geometry along the edges, so you don't get those weird forms that kind of strand off into nothing. So here I'm doing that again, doing some Dynamesh, making sure it slots into where I think it would slot in, building up the back end of it so that it'll match up with the back face in a way that I think should work. Just a lot of pushing and pulling and clay buildup, Damien Standard, all the basic stuff that I've been using throughout this entire process. No custom alphas, no weird detailing stuff, just all basic brushes, all basic stuff. It kind of looks like a football helmet, like a face shield for a football helmet, but it's supposed to be bone. Damien Standard is good for digging in creases, but also pulling out edges for a specific piece of geometry. So if you want to have like hard edges or pointy edges, the Damien Standard brush is really good for that. More pushing, more pulling, making sure that it looks cool from every angle. So sometimes I'll flip the model over and zoom out and zoom back in. I'm loosely following the sketch at this point, but since there's a lack of detail for a lot of this stuff, I'm just kind of going off of instinct and where I think it would look neat to have a shadow. Here I'm checking the overall look with the horns and the teeth to make sure it looks like it should fit all together. The eye section, I'm eventually going to make another piece of geometry and stick that in there and then move all that stuff back and deepen those creases. But for now, I'm just marking in where I think extra bits of fleshy stuff will go. Checking out the overall proportions, and I think it's pretty close to the end of this particular session. A little bit more detail for the back, but I think I'm getting pretty close to done. Looks like it's pretty close to done. So yeah, this all looks really complicated, but it's all simple stuff. Just clay buildup, smooth, move tool, Damien Standard, buildup, smooth, Dynamesh, all that kind of stuff, and working with different subtools. So it's a very simple process, and the results are pretty good, I think, for getting some high detailed stuff and separating objects into their own subtools. So you treat it like layers in Photoshop, so you can turn them on and off, isolate them, and work on specific areas without having to worry about all the other stuff interfering with it. So that does it for this version. If you want to see the full hour sculpt with commentary and more in-depth stuff, more in-depth commentary, check out the Patreon. And thanks for checking it out. I'll see you back for session number 5. Bye.